faith stories.
My now wife Chelsea was like, "Hey, you're coming to church with me on Sunday," and I was like, "All right, I've been looking at the Bible. Let's do this."
Fishing memories.
When I first started, I was just fish, focus on the fish. And I see the kid catch a fish, I'm like, good job, perfect, awesome. And then he goes up there and I'm like, we're catching slot snook. And this kid's up here going, oh, the breeze. I'm like, this is exactly what it's about.
Meaningful conversations.
You have to stay in the Word. You have to have a good support system. You have to know what the end goal is. You have to know who God is.
Positivity. This is the Faith and Fishing Podcast. Your hosts, Cam Steele.
If your identity is you're an angler, whenever you're not doing well in the water, that's whenever you can't be content.
And Robert Randall.
And his timing is perfect. We might not always agree with it, and we might not always understand it at the moment.
Bring you interviews with some amazing guests from the fishing community and discuss all things to do with fishing and their faith. Welcome to the family.
Hey y'all, welcome back to the Faith and Fishing Podcast. I'm Cam.
Hey, and I'm Robert.
And we are going to have a great episode. It has been a little bit of a challenging day. It started extremely early. We've got a sick dog that I'm trying to keep an eye on over there, and my phone is exploding, so I had to turn the silence it because dealing with a burst water pipe at work. But I'm not on call, so I can mute that and deal with that tomorrow. But Robert, how are you doing, man?
Pretty good. Still crazy at work, and just trying to get in between navigating everything that's going on in our lives and the whole weather aspect in between two hurricanes, one going and fixing to go across Florida, and then Hurricane Helene that affected the western part of North Carolina and Tennessee, Georgia, and all that. So it's been interesting, and some of that affects my work as far as logistics wise and trucking wise, and where those guys are coming from and going to. So definitely been a busy stretch, and but I haven't done any fishing because I know that's going to be your next question. But you know what? I may throw my riding reel in the back of my truck tomorrow and go over to the work pond. I figured it's probably was still been blown out a little bit from all the rain, but they ought to be right because they haven't seen any lures from me in quite a while. So you probably, if it's not still blown out and muddy, might go snag a couple at lunch tomorrow. We'll see.
I hear you.
What about you?
Oh no, I have not done any fishing at all. No, and cleaned out the shed a little bit, but that's about as close as it's come. And I only say that because I got to pick up some of the fishing rods. But yeah, it has been a little bit of a crazy time here, dealing with a sprained finger of all things, and it's my index finger on my dominant hand, which is something that you really don't think about how often you use it until it hurts whenever you use it. But yeah, we have a fantastic guest to get to. And I don't know that we have any kind of announcements or anything like that. Do you have anything, Robert?
Nope. Good to go.
Right. Well, let's thank a couple sponsors, and then let's jump into the episode.
Get Outdoors Pedal and Paddle is one of the largest canoe, kayak, and cycling retailers in the Southeast, with a huge selection of kayaks, canoes, bikes, and all the accessories needed to experience paddling and cycling comfortably and safely. Get Outdoors helps to expand and educate the paddling community through their free demos held on local lakes in the Greensboro, North Carolina area, and through in-store clinics and on the water courses and demos, and will even get your new boat rigged up for kayak fishing for you. Stop by the shop in Greensboro, North Carolina, or visit them online at shopgetoutdoors.com to be wowed by their selection.
Mr. B Lure Company has every wired or skirted bait you could ask for, and they're made right here in the U.S. with high-quality components like Gamakatsu and owner hooks, and hand-tied skirts in more colors than you can fit in your tackle box, including the Battle Shad color, which sends 30% of the proceeds to the Wounded Warrior Project. Check out their line of classics like Arctic jigs, swim jigs, and spinner baits, and new favorites like underspins, underswims, and some of the most unique bladed jigs on the market. Head on over to MrBLureCompany.com, that's MRBLureCompany.com, and use promo code faithnfishn, just like our Instagram handle, for 15% off your first purchase. All right, so earlier this year we had Mr. Ben Ricks on the podcast, and that was an episode that a lot of y'all thoroughly enjoyed. I know Robert and I had a blast with it because we really got to geek out, and me especially, because whenever we start talking about scientific stuff when it comes to fish, I'm all about it. But he's part of the Better Fishing with Two Biologists podcast from the North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission, and alongside of him is our guest today, which is Corey Oakley, and I'm going to try not to botch this as I read it, but the Assistant Chief of Sport Fish Management for the Inland Fisheries Division of the NC Wildlife Resources Commission. So we have Mr. Corey Oakley joining us, and Corey, I was telling you before we started recording, I was tickled this week because on your podcast you dropped the carp fishing episode, and our listeners know that I thoroughly enjoy that and have been on a quest for a 30-pounder from the kayak for quite a while now, and I was awesome. It was awesome to hear someone of kindred spirits whenever it comes to carp fishing, something that you. In the world that we are in, so often it's bass fishing. Everyone talks about how horrible carp are, and how they all need to be eliminated, and they're the worst, and and I'm over here like, yeah, but I can catch a 30-pounder. Can you?
True. Yeah, that's very true. Yeah, I mean, if you listen to that podcast, you'll hear Dion, who's one of our biologists up in District 1. And he's a real young guy. He reminds me a lot of me. I mean, we look totally different. He's got hair and I don't. He reminds me when I was that age, just excited about biology and excited. And I still am. But, I mean, just how you are when you're young and getting into a career, just gung-ho about everything. And you can hear that. You can hear his energy in that podcast about how much he loves carp fishing. And that's one of the things we try to do with the podcast. Well, the podcast has many different reasons why we've done it. It was we as an agency don't necessarily get our message out as good as I think we should at times, particularly in the fish world. We really weren't doing that. And I was looking for an avenue to really kind of tap into anglers. And, the podcast world was already kind of going gangbusters with podcasts on fisheries. And I was like, or on fishing, not fisheries, but on fishing. And what I really wanted to do was kind of marry fishing to the work that we do. And you hear that in the intro of the podcast. And that's all I ever wanted it to be. But through that, we've introduced our staff to our listeners. If people will listen, you'll hear, I can think of multiple podcasts that when our staff are on there, you'll hear the passion in their voice of either the biology that they work on or the fishing that they like to do. I think of Kevin Dockendorf and flyers. Nobody knows about flyers. Really and truly, unless you've caught one, you don't even know what a flyer looks like. You don't even know what it is. There's a fish called a flyer. Kind of thing.
Right.
And his passion for flyers, it's just his, it's as Ben says, it's his soul animal. That's what Ben calls him. When he gets, he's like, it's got to be his soul animal because he loves it too much for it not to be. And so, you hear that passion in our staff, and that's the kind of passion that our staff have for our fisheries and for our outdoors and our natural resources. And so I've loved doing the podcast. In fact, I talked to Ben today. We're going to go do a podcast tomorrow over in Shelby. And, I told him, I said, when it's tough and the rough patches of work get involved, I love this thing because it's the way that we can communicate to our anglers in a way that they consume it, and now if they don't consume podcasts, we wouldn't do it. But they do, they do. And so, it's one avenue that we can use, and it's getting bigger. Our listenership's gone up a little bit here lately, but we're starting to do a little more advertising. We're thinking about going to doing videos like this and not being all, just audio. So we got things in the works to make it better as time goes on.
Absolutely. And I'm sorry, we got ahead of ourselves there.
Oh,
First, let me say welcome to the show.
Well, that's fine. I get out in front a lot. People had to tell me to slow up, so don't worry about that. Well, I appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely.
I look forward to it.
And we've already introduced the podcast, but take a minute to introduce yourself to our listeners, man.
Yeah, so my name's Corey Oakley. As was mentioned, I'm the assistant chief of inland fisheries. I'm one of two. My side of the house is I'm kind of over all the sport fish management. So those are the things that people like to go and fish for and catch and take home. There's another whole part of our division that works on the animals that you don't do that with, such as mussels and crayfish and small fishes, endangered and threatened animals. And there's another assistant chief over that. And so, I started, I went to school at NC State, and I started as an engineering student. I thought that's what I was going to be, thought that's what I was going to do. And I was in differential equations class with Dr. Griggs, who may or may not be living. Hey, Dr. Griggs, if you're listening or watching. And it had nothing to do with Dr. Griggs, but he was like 6 chalkboards into one problem. And I was just like, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I probably had been approaching that point. It probably wasn't right at that moment, but it was at that moment. I was just like, man, I don't know that this is what I want to do with my life. And honestly, it led to prayer with the Lord of trying to seek what he wanted me to do. And where I started was I got the catalog out from NC State of classes that were offered. And I'm looking down through there and I see this thing called Fisheries and Wildlife Program. I was like, what is this? Kind of stuff, and I went and talked to a man who is living, Dr. Richard Noble, who's now retired. He's in his 80s. And he sold me on it. I mean, I was down the river before he knew it, so to speak. And I was all in, and I've been all in ever since. Got my undergraduate from there, my master's from there. I worked on sturgeon for my master's degree here in North Carolina under Dr. Joe Hightower, and then started as a fisheries biologist in District 5, which is not where I'm from. I'm from the coast of North Carolina. I'm from New Bern originally. And my wife and I moved to the Piedmont, and I haven't moved out. I would like to because there's too many people here, but my job keeps me here. And, kind of worked up the ranks, was the research coordinator for a while, was the supervisor of the Piedmont region. Ben's the supervisor of the coastal region now. And then I started as the assistant chief a little over 3 years ago now in Raleigh. And it's been a journey for sure, but it's been a good journey. There's hard days. Today was a hard day. The past few days have been hard days, but there's also a lot of good days too. I like seeing people excited about our fisheries. I like talking to people on the phone or talking via email about the work we do for the citizens of North Carolina, and we do it for everybody. We don't just do it for anglers. We do it for everybody. Obviously, we're focused on anglers in my half of the division for sure. But that's kind of me in a nutshell, so to speak.
Absolutely. What have been some of the projects that you've done in your tenure there that you're most proud of?
Oh wow. Probably when I was in the district biologist world, I think the thing I was most proud of in the Piedmont region, we have a lot of streams that are kind of untouched. A lot of people don't know about them. I mean, I can rail them off: Eno, Flat, Hall, Deep, Rocky, Uwari. There's all these Piedmont streams that are just absolutely like gems that nobody knows about because everybody's so focused on reservoirs. And I started work. Me and another guy that was in the region at the time. We started working on a fish called the Roanoke bass, and a lot of people call them red eyes. That's where they got a bright red eye. They're in the sunfish family. They're in the same family with bluegills and largemouth and everything else. But they're rock bass basically. But they're a very special rock bass. They're only found in North Carolina and Virginia. They're not found anywhere else on the planet. So it makes them kind of unique. They get bigger than rock bass. Rock bass in our mountains get, 7-8 ounces is a good fish. A 10-ounce fish is a stellar fish. Roanoke bass will get, all right, well, the state record's right at 3 pounds. But a lot of them will, a good one is somewhere between 12 ounces to 1.5 pounds, kind of fish. And they're a lot of fun to catch. And we started together, and then he moved on, and we did about 5 years worth of work on Roanoke's scattered throughout the Piedmont. And it was work that hadn't been done in probably 40 years. And we learned a lot about them, learned a lot about their genetics and how they've been kind of isolated due to dams and issues that are going on with things that, Europeans built that we didn't know would have that kind of effect at the time. And, I just love that project. It was like being in the mountains basically, because it's very rocky, streams and it's just fun work. It was different than reservoirs. I like reservoirs, but it was different than reservoirs. So I'm pretty proud of that project. And then when I became research coordinator, I started working on Lake Norman. That was kind of my baby. We were getting out of the striper game, going into the hybrid game. And we were worried about were they going to do the same thing that striped bass do. And so we did. And then it became, people are taking way too many of them out of the lake. So then it became, are they being overexploited? And so we started out on a 5-year tagging project, basically where we tagged fish for 3 years. And then we got returns for 5 years. And basically estimating harvest rates of the system. And that project's probably the most rewarding project I've had. And the reason I say that is if anybody knows anything about the history of Lake Norman, our relationship with Lake Norman anglers has not been good. It's been adversarial at best a lot of times, particularly in the 80s and the early 90s. There were meetings that just were hostile, to be honest. And through that project, me being on the water, I was on the water a week a month for every month. So I tell my wife this, I was like, I didn't tell you at the time, but I did the math. I was gone 3 months out of the year, really and truly, for 3 years. And so it was a lot of work and a lot of effort. It was me going down there and staying for that week and just working with some volunteers and some other biologists. And we just putting tags in fish, but people coming up to you, talking to you, having those conversations one-on-one. It's amazing how barriers break down when people can talk to each other in a civil tongue. And people can see, because we had NC Fisheries written down the side of the boat, so they knew who we were. And we developed a volunteer network where people were giving us fish to put tags in. And we set up stations all along the lake, and they drop them off and call us. And if I was in Mebane, I'd drive to Lake Norman and put a tag in it and put it back out in the water, and it was crazy. And so, and I'm good friends with a lot of those anglers today. I can pick up the phone right now and call them right now, and we can have a conversation about Lake Norman, or we can go fishing together, or, they would help me out again if I needed to work. And so for me, we learned a lot biologically, but man, the doors that we broke down and the walls that we broke down through that process it's invaluable. and I hope that continues there. And I hope we can do it in other places where, people can understand the work we do, and we're not adversarial, and we're actually out here working for you. We're not, we're not the bad guy. And so we're actually trying to help. We might not always agree, and that's okay. And as Ben and I have said on our podcast numerous times, you call me, I'm going to talk to you. You can be screaming at me. I'm still going to learn something. I'd prefer you not scream at me. But if you feel like you got to scream at me, okay, I'll sit there and listen to it for a while. Now, I generally won't let you scream at my employees. I generally step in and be like, hey, look, if you can't keep a civil tongue, we're out of here. But if you want to scream at me, okay. At the end, we might part ways and disagree. In the end, more than likely, we're going to agree on a whole lot more than we disagree with, and you're probably not going to be yelling at me by the time it's all said and done. And that was the great thing about that project, was just so many people. I mean, it's hundreds of people that I've met and know at Lake Norman that I can call today. Unfortunately, some of them have passed on. Some of them have died since then, and that's not been that long ago. 3 or 4 years. And then, we also did another project at Lake Norman as I was transitioning in the supervisor role that I had a pretty sizable hand in. And that was basically tracking hybrids to see, how they tolerated the thermal differences in the summertime and the lack of oxygen in the summertime, and all that information's about to come out. We're almost done with all of that. And man, putting those tags in those fish and tracking them across the lake, it is unbelievable what you can learn about a species and an animal in an environment when you track it 24/7, 365, for 18 months to 2 years. Those tags lasted 18 months or so. And it's just amazing what they do. Things that we never dreamed of fish. We had ideas of what the things that we thought they would do. But what they actually do is like, wow, that's impressive. To avoid oxygen, I'll do this, and I'll do something just extraordinary. And so it's just been such a learning experience. And it's so fun to, I've had to pass that project on because I'm not there anymore in that part of the world. And the biologist that's working on it, she brought me in her office and she was showing me the data. And I was just like, mind blowing, what's in front of me. I'm just like, I can't believe it, kind of thing. I mean, I thought it, but now you've proved it. And, so it's fun. It's a lot of fun. And I've had a great time doing it, and I'm not done yet. I got a while yet, whether I want to or not. I got a while yet. So, I got shorter than Ben though. Ben's got a long time. So.
This is one of those episodes, Robert. So Robert and I are podcast junkies, and we get a podcaster on here every now and then, and I forget that I'm on the podcast, and I start listening, and especially whenever it's stuff like this that I'm like,
oh no, don't be sorry,
super interested in, like, and I could sit here and listen to a biologist talk for as long as they wanted to talk, and be like completely enthralled the whole time. And every so often I'm like, oh man, I need to be asking a question or leading a conversation or something. But
so one of the cool things about that project is we knew they were avoiding, because we weren't having them. And I mean, some of them were dying in these fish kills that used to wipe the striper population out. And I won't get into all the science of why that's occurring, but we're like, they're not doing exactly the same thing as these stripers. And so what happens is I'll try to show it with my hands. There's a lower level at the bottom that has oxygen in it early in the summer. There's a middle level that kind of starts to come along that doesn't have any oxygen in it. And then there's an upper level that has oxygen in it, but it's hot at Lake Norman. And what the stripers would do, they'd get down in that cold pocket because herring were down there, and they'd feed on them herring. I mean, they're just, because the herring want the cold water, the stripers like it too, and they had oxygen. So they had no reason to go anywhere. And what the stripers weren't realizing was that bubble was shrinking as time went on. And the middle layer was getting thicker as time went on. And so in order to survive that, as your oxygen is getting depleted in that bubble, you're going to have to figure out a way to swim out, up, something, to get back to that the upper hot water layer. And they're not going to want to be there. That's not desirable for a striped bass. But we knew the hybrids weren't doing that in mass. Like the stripers, our biggest fish kill of stripers we counted was 10,000, adult large stripers in one summer in about a 2-week span. And we'd only seen, I think our biggest hybrid kill was only about 100. And that was only one time. And the rest of the time, we hadn't had any kills. It's like, where are they? And so I hypothesized that they were doing something weird, because I knew they wanted to be down in that colder water where those herring were to eat, but they weren't dying down there. So they had to be somehow like traversing, across. And lo and behold, that's exactly what they're doing. You can see fish, they're at the bottom of that hot water. So they're as cold as they can be in that hot water layer that's really oxygenated. And they dive straight down, go down. And we're talking 10, 12 meters of depth that they swim straight down and get into that bubble, feed, and swim straight back up. And you literally can see them there's data on the graph. It looks like a porpoise. They're doing this over and over and over again all summer until that bubble bursts and there's no more oxygen there. And then they sit right at the bottom of that hot water layer because they want to be as cool as they can be and be able to breathe. And so, but stripers never did that. Stripers were there. They're like, nope, I'm not going anywhere. I'm here until I die. And they died. And they died in mass. And so it's just really cool to see nature that way, to see an animal, do something like that I had hypothesized with the head volunteer. We had hypothesized that's exactly what they're doing. They got to be going down and up, down and up, down and up. Because that's where the food is. If they're in this area, they got to be going down to feed because they want to eat. And lo and behold, that's exactly what they're doing. And it's crazy. It really is. It's a neat project. And when the data comes out, it's going to be phenomenal. Really cool stuff coming out.
Awesome.
Sorry, I nerded out again. I do that a lot, so you just have to stop me from nerding out.
You're gonna have to look to somebody else to stop you from nerding out. That's my cup of tea too.
Yeah, and it's just amazing to me. And the next question is like, okay, why do the hybrids do that, and why do the stripers do something different? Why do they, how can they figure that out? But then then you can't, and then you have a big fish kill. It's like what? That's my next question that I automatically go to is like, that is cool.
The white bass side of the family.
But it has a lot to do with their white bass genetics. So for those that don't know, a hybrid striped bass is a cross between a striped bass and a white bass. They're in the same family, which is the maroons. White perch is in that family as well.
And if you want white bass have a fun argument on Facebook, get in an argument with a bass fisherman about whether or not a largemouth bass is a true bass.
Oh, it's not. It's a sunfish. But whatever. Whatever. I'm not going to get in that argument, but they're wrong. They're dead wrong, actually. They are a sunfish just like a bluegill. I hate to break it to them, but a bass is just a giant bluegill. Sorry, guys. Sorry. Not sorry. Sorry, not sorry. But so it's the white bass side. The white bass are more tolerant to higher thermal temperatures. They can take a little bit less oxygen. So they're just a little bit tougher fish than the striped bass is. And so that's really why they have that ability to stay in that upper area. Because if they didn't have that ability, they wouldn't do that porpoise motion. They would go down in that bubble just like the stripers did, and that's where they would stay, because stripers get stressed out when they get above about 75 degrees Fahrenheit. And so they're not going to, every reservoir in North Carolina, short of some mountain reservoirs in the high country, every reservoir in North Carolina is going to be in the 80s or higher in that top layer throughout the summer, starting probably by mid-June, maybe even earlier, and go that way through October. So, so stripers just don't want to do it. White bass don't care.
All right. So, Robert, do you want how do you want to do this? You want to start?
You go ahead with the carp questions, and we'll go down that because I have a couple of those questions too.
Actually, the biggest question on my mind right now is actually the state of our trout fisheries. So after Helene, is when do you think the next opportunity for catching brook trout in North Carolina is actually going to be again?
It's today. So I was up there. That's why my life has been pretty busy. I was up there the past 3 or 4 days, and it's devastating. If you hadn't seen it in person, it is quite devastating. I've witnessed a lot of floods from eastern North Carolina. I've lived through Fran and Floyd and Matthew and Florence, and those floods are just as devastating in their own way, with high water and getting in houses and ruining your house, and you have to tear your house down and start over. It's a whole nother world when it's funneled through mountain valleys at high rates of speed. And we'd go along a road and it's just foundation, and there's no home there. The foundation's all that's left. It's just a concrete pad. There might be a single line of cinder blocks, and that's about it. The rest is just gone, and not just gone. Like, you can look down in the creek and you don't see anything. It's just creek. But the animals find a way. We were up there and we were in a highly damaged stream, and the stream has jumped its banks in multiple places. The streams aren't even in the same place anymore. So that's one of the things I'd tell listeners is, your favorite fishing hole is probably moved. It's moved 100 yards east or 100 yards west or 100 yards south or something. The creeks have created new channels and cut off the old channels. And I mean, just the power of water is just something to behold. I mean, I stood in the stream channel, and in front of me, the stream channel had been cut off because the stream had dumped. I guess the stones probably weighed 200, 250 pounds apiece, and it was probably 50 yard long and 20 yard, maybe not 20 yard, 15 yard wide. And it was about 20 foot high of rocks that river had just piled up. And then it decided, that's too many rocks, I'm going left. And it cut the channel left and went around it. And so there's a whole new channel there. It's just amazing to see the power of water and the devastation that's there. And it's going to be a while. I mean, I was talking to a lady today at the gas station as I was leaving Marion today, and you could tell she was down on it, down on her luck, and things were not good. And she was working the counter, and she's like, it's hard to have a smile today. And I told her, I said, look, I said, I haven't been through a flood like this. I'll be honest. I said, but I have been through floods, and I've seen houses flooded, and I've seen friends' houses flooded. In Floyd, my grandparents' house flooded. They had to move out, and had to renovate and all that. They didn't lose their home, but they were displaced for quite some time during Floyd. And so I can remember all that. They lived in a hotel down the street for, I don't know how long, a long time. And, and I told her, I said, it's day by day. I said, there's hope there. I said, you'd be surprised at how things will turn around in a short period of time. I said, just look in this store that you're in right now. You're surrounded by linemen, road workers, people handing out supply. I mean, the place was flooded with people that were there to help. And as we were coming back east, the highway was full of cops and rescue and power companies and everything else, just still pouring into the mountains just as hard as they could pour into the mountains. And, and so it takes time to recover from that kind of thing. And the streams are the same way. It will take time. There's canopy lost. You think about what trout need. They like cold water. When the canopy's lost, the sun hits the water, it warms it up faster. Trout don't like it. They won't tolerate it. But we were in the degraded stream. There's trout everywhere, dude. I mean, trout everywhere. You could look into every pool and there was trout in the pools. And that's going to be the case. If you like smallmouth fishing in the mountains on the cane and the toe, I mean, places that absolutely, if you see the aerial views of it, just wiped out. I mean, houses and homes and businesses and everything, and the river's wiped out. I mean, it's just flattened. And the riparian, that's the vegetation that's on the banks, the trees and the plants that are on the banks, just scoured, just, a river that was, 40 foot across was in its when it was going in certain places was half a mile across. I mean, just impressive how much water went through those valleys. And but the fish find a way. I'm telling you, it's a part of their innate nature. They find a way to hide behind rocks and debris fields and everything else. And I mean, I talked to the biologist that works, David Goodfried, about smallmouth. We did a podcast with him on smallmouth, and he's like, yeah, in 2 weeks, ain't no doubt in my mind, smallmouth will be banging on the Canyon River if you could fish it. He's like, they will be there. And it'll be, and it just, they're aquatic animals, so they're used to floods. Maybe not of this magnitude, but they're, and animals do wash, and that kind of stuff. But there's animals coming upstream washing down to where the animals, it's like this one moved this way and this one came here and this one came here, so they just know how to do it. Something God put in them that they understand. And, we humans don't know how to deal with water because we're not aquatic animals. We can't breathe underwater. But yeah, it's going to, as far as trout fishing goes and as far as stocking goes, we're having to reevaluate a lot of that because a lot of our streams we're going to have to assess our streams, our hatchery supported and our delayed harvest streams, to see if it can even accept trout at this point. We do have damage to a trout hatchery, one of our smaller one, Armstrong, and it's pretty significant damage. And so we're going to have to evaluate how to fix it. And that's going to take some time. That's where I was at Armstrong State Fish Hatchery, and that is going to take some time. So,
and are they going to see that kind of cyclical, like we see in the coast whenever a hurricane comes through, where you'll have a bit where the fishing's pretty hard and everything, but then in a couple of years it'll be phenomenal?
Yeah, I would tell you that we'll probably have one of the best trout spawns we've had in a long time this fall, because there's a lot of exposed rock, no silt on it, that's been scoured out. Trout love it. We will have a bank. We'll probably have if it's not this fall, it'll be next fall. This fall might be a little different because it's so fresh. But next fall we might have just an absolute awesome spawn.
All right, Robert, I'll release you now. You can.
Oh no,
you don't have to
I'm
go back anymore.
no, I'm not holding back. I like the conversation and learning about different things, because that was one of the questions that was run through my head, was that exact, how does that affect those fisheries when it's just massive amounts of water? And I get it. I drive across the the Hall and the Deep River every day. I commute from Fuquay to Sanford, so I go across both of them, and it's amazing. And that's not even a part of North Carolina that was affected. But when it even rains here, it's amazing the amount of water that comes through the Deep, and then where they're letting it out of Jordan Lake, and it comes through the Hall. But it's one of the questions that I had was, you know, and it's one of those things that's kind of unexplainable. They get to where they're hiding behind rocks and different things. And then, but that's good to know that those fisheries, because that was a question that I had. And, you know, I'll start off the carp conversation though, because that's something that really affect one of the fisheries that I grew up in Middle Tennessee. So, you know, if you know that much about Tennessee lakes, but Kentucky Lake, Lake Barkley, land between the lakes is stretched between the Tennessee-Kentucky border. And that's one species that has, you hear a lot of talk about Kentucky Lake and the carp. And then when I've lived in Fuquay for 15 years, and so I was here and duck hunted a lot at Harris when there were ducks there and when there was hydrilla, and it was a whole different ball game to what it is now. And then carps were introduced to that. So one of my questions is, what is the difference between the carp that you see, and I think that I'm on the right track. What's the difference between a sterile carp and the carps that you see like in Kentucky Lake? Because when they were introduced to Harris Lake to help control some of that, I was like scratching my head. And then the more research I did, I'm like, okay, well, this is a totally different scenario. But can you teach me a little bit more about those two, the differences in those two?
So there's actually numerous species involved. They often get called just carp. The carp that's used here to control aquatic vegetation is the white amur, something, AMUR, and commonly called a grass carp in North Carolina. It's big, silvery, got a big ugly face on it. You know, people like to shoot it with bow and arrows, and you know, and if you can catch one, you better hold on tight because it's going to pull you all over the place. They're a little more difficult to catch than common carp, and I think common carp are hard to catch. But and so that's been used as a biological control for decades now in North Carolina to control invasive aquatic plants. They are sterile. They are triploid, meaning that they have it's something they do to them at a very early age and early in their life cycle to put them under pressure, and it basically makes them sterile where they can't reproduce. So you don't have to worry about them populating the population. Now, if you stock them annually over and over and over again, that's just like stocking a year class, and basically you got a population. But now the other carp that you're talking about out towards the Tennessee River and the Mississippi River that has been just, you know, all over the map in terms of the devastation that they have caused, those are the big head and the silver, and I think there's a black, and there might be one more. I think there's actually 4 species of carp out there. Those were not sterile, and they have reproduced. And obviously, you've seen the videos of carp and all that jazz. They do the same thing. They disturb the bottom. They eat vegetation. They do a lot of that kind of stuff. But you know, generally what they're doing is they're taking up a lot of biomass. They're overpopulating the system. Therefore, they're eating a lot of vegetation, and they're tearing up a lot of things that those systems depend on. And so that's the differences between. They are different species, but they also interact a little different than the grass carp that we have. We have a requirement in North Carolina that if you truck that fish into North Carolina, it has to be certified triploid. We will not take a diploid fish in North Carolina. Most of the East Coast states will not take diploid fish. We don't want to reproduce in population. We want the whole reason for that fish is it was a biological tool to control invasive plants. And once the invasive plant is controlled, we want to cut that tool off. You know, they'll stay in the system as long as they age out, but we don't, once we quit stocking them, they're gone. And I say, once we quit stocking them, we don't stock them. That in North Carolina. In North Carolina, that's done by the Division of Water Resources, which is a different agency altogether that's in charge of aquatic plant management.
Gotcha.
Did that help? I don't know.
Oh, yeah, it did, because I thought that I was on the right track, and it's exactly the way that you explained it. But I'm sure if I have those questions, there's listeners that are scratching their head about, carp.
Yeah, the one thing I'd say, you brought up Harris, and I'll add a little bit of that because we get that question a lot. I get that question a lot. Is, why did we stock carp in Harris and all this kind of stuff. So Harris has a long storied history of being just a phenomenal bass fishery. And there's other fisheries there that are phenomenal too. Their crappie fishery is really good. Their white perch fishery has been good in the past. Their shellcracker fishery has been good in the past. But I think it was in the late 80s that hydrilla showed up on the scene and took over the lake, and about 25% of the lake had hydrilla on it. Hydrilla is kind of the same story as Alabama bass, in that an invasive fish, if it was kept in the system, is not necessarily a bad thing if you could contain it in the system. But the problem is those things become source populations for so many other places. And so we were seeing hydrilla in Jordan Lake in the back pockets. Basically, if you can connect a line where birds go, from the backwater to the backwater of both lakes, which ain't far.
It's not
that's
far.
That's where hydrilla was showing up on Jordan, was in the back pockets of those places. And we were real concerned about that because there's a lot of water intakes in Jordan Lake for municipalities. And then it's spread tremendously downstream into the Cape Fear. There's a lot of hydrilla in the Cape Fear, and it's outcompeted a lot of our native plants that are along that river system. And so DWR decided they wanted to, attack it. But before that ever happened, hydrilla was really on the decline. We don't have a real reason why. We don't know that. It's one of those things in science we haven't learned yet. Hydrilla declined in the lake for probably 7 or 8 years and then gotten to a pretty low level without us even doing anything to it. But DWR decided they wanted to knock it out right when it got to the low point. And so they started stocking grass carp. They're still stocking grass carp, but they're not stocking much anymore because hydrilla is pretty much under control at this point.
It is, yeah.
But, we as an agency, we decided, hey, we got to do something to replace it. And so we started a native aquatic plant program on that lake, and we've done a lot of artificial work on that, artificial structure work on that lake. And what I tell people, people think, oh, you planted the plants and it died. Oh, you planted the plants and it died. Oh, you planted the plants and it died. And all that's very true. But what we've seen is that planting aquatic plants is about a 10 to 15 year plan. It takes 10 to 15 years of planting, going back and planting again, going back and planting again, planting in new places before it really takes hold. And the example I give is Gaston. We've been planting aquatic plants in Gaston probably going on close to 20 years. We didn't start it, but we've kind of we took it over maybe about a decade ago. And we really started hitting it really hard. And now you can go and there's just shorelines just covered in plants, to the point that the landowners are now like, you got to get rid of these plants. So there's that balance, with everything. And Harris will get that way again, I do believe. It's too fertile a lake for it not to. It just takes time. And, we're really only about, I want to say maybe this might be our 5th year on Harris. And, there's going to be a day where it's like it clicks and it just takes off. And you got enough material on the landscape that it just kind of goes. And so that's coming. It will not be hydrilla. There's nothing that mimics hydrilla to the degree that hydrilla does. It will not be as great as hydrilla. I ain't gonna lie to you. But it will be something that bass and other fishes will use for sure when it gets really established well.
Yeah, and I think that's what you have to get to is something that is going to take the place of that, and you're going to get the benefits of it without having to worry about transferring hydrilla to different bodies of water. Because as much as you tell somebody to clean off all your stuff, and as much as people, even people that may try to do it, they're not going to get it all. And then there's people that just are not going to do it either, that are going to transfer that.
And even if everybody did, the ducks won't.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. But most of our entry points that we see for invasive plants are boat ramps. That's where it all starts. Yeah. It all starts at a boat ramp. And if we can catch it at a boat ramp, like if we got eyes on it and can catch it, we can nip it in the bud pretty quick. But once it, across the lake, it's hard to maintain. It's hard to manage without grass carp at that point. So.
All right, back to you, Cam.
Well, we are at the 50-minute mark, so I think it's probably time to go ahead and ask
Not for me to shut up.
about your faith and about your faith story. So,
Sure.
kind of tell us your faith story. What is it that you believe in, and how did you come to believe that?
So, I'll be honest with you, I was blessed. As I look back on my life, well, I've been blessed my whole life, but I was blessed at an early age. I had godly parents. When the church doors were open, we were there. They had me in a godly ministry, explaining the gospel to me. And, for that, I am very thankful. Now I didn't know the Lord at that young of an age. But as I reached my teenage years, I realized that, there's really no hope without Jesus. There's really no way without Jesus. And he just saw fit to save me. And for that, I'm very thankful. And as I progressed, into my college years, and as I became an adult, God has given me a godly wife. And we have a teenage son together, and we're trying to raise him as best we know how. And I fail every day. I'm a sinner saved by grace, and that alone. And it's not anything that I have done in myself. It is all the work of Jesus Christ on the cross. And I'm just, I don't know how to explain it. I mean, other than that, it's just that simple. That is the gospel. Is that it's Jesus and Jesus alone, and it's his work on the cross that did it all. When he said it's finished, it is finished. It takes no more than the work that he did. And for that, I'm very thankful. We go to church here in Burlington. We go to Beacon Baptist Church here in Burlington. We love our church. We've been there we've been here 21 years this November. And we've been there. We actually moved on Halloween of 03, and we went to church November 1st of 03 at Beacon Baptist, and we never went it. We fell in love with it probably within the first 2 weeks, and we've never been anywhere else. It was where we wanted to be. And, and God's just been gracious to us. I think people, I can get into the same, I can do the same thing. I can complain all the time. I catch myself complaining and, this, that, or the other. I can't quote the verse right now off the top of my head because I am tired, but, it's in Philippians 4. It talks about doing things without grumbling or complaining, or, that I think it's 4:13 maybe, or something. I might have it wrong. I can't remember. But anyway, it's on my desk. It sits behind my desk. Every day I look at it, and I think about how good God has been to me, how blessed we are to live in the country that we live in, how blessed we are to have the freedoms that we have. It's phenomenal. I mean, we didn't choose where we would grow up and where we live. And, if you just think about it on that basic of a level, I mean, how good has God been to us, that we get to live the life that we live and go hunting and fishing and love the creation that God has made. And there's a lot of people in this world that never get that real opportunity. There's a lot of people in the world that never hear the gospel. And that's sad to me as well, but yeah, I guess that's my faith story. I could talk on and on and on forever about how good the Lord's been to me. But we are 50 minutes in, so that's how we'll start.
No, that's awesome. I mean, I love having the guests that I can just say, all right, go, and just let you go. And those are some of my favorite episodes because I can enjoy it and not feel like I have have to guide and pull teeth to get answers to questions and all that good stuff.
And you know, one of the things people say, you know, ask me all the time, how did you get in this field? And I talked a little bit about that, and or why did you get in this field? Well, I grew up fishing with my dad. I mean, that if you've listened to the podcast, you'll hear that come through over and over again. I mean, the bond that my father and I got to have on that boat together, for years, we fished almost every weekend together. And I went back in college. When I was in college, I'd go home on the weekends and fish with him. And that bond, I mean, we solved all the world's problems. I don't know if y'all do that on the boat, but we solve all the world's problems on the boat. I mean, we have no control over it whatsoever, but we got it right. I mean, I can tell you that we got it right. We got it pinned down. And for that time in my life, I will be forever grateful. I mean, the wisdom that my dad gave to me, the wisdom that God gave to my dad, and turn around and he passed it down to me. I try to do the same thing. I mean, my son and I don't go fishing nearly as often as my dad and I did because of my work, but my son is interested in basketball and plays it, plays high school basketball. And, we sit there and chat, and it's the same kind of bond that you get, having that opportunity. But what I was really saying was, why did you get into this? I can tell you right now, as a Christian, I don't know of a better job than to be outside and to be around everything that God has created and to just absolutely be in awe of it. To see the inner workings of how things work. It's just phenomenal to me. It's just like that hybrid striped bass going up and going down, going up and going down, going up and going down. Just that innate nature in that fish is just, and I get to see that. And that's probably what drives me more, is just learning more and more about, nerding out with Ben, and we have a common bond. We're both Christians and we love the Lord, and we can talk about things and we understand it, from different perspectives than other people do, for sure, and we just enjoy it. And as Ben said, he's like, I don't know that I could be good at anything else. This is the only thing I know to do. And I can do other things. I got hobbies. I can, I got a lot of things I can do, but at the end of the day, it's about the only thing I'm good at is running my mouth and talking fishing. That's about it.
I hear you.
And I live in a country that I can have a job doing it.
Yeah.
How great is that? There's not many countries that have jobs like we have, so, it's pretty cool.
Absolutely. All right. Well, there's a couple questions that we ask every guest whenever they come on. And I'm always excited to hear the answers. And I'm gonna switch things up on Robert a little bit this time, and I'm gonna flip flop who asked what question.
Well, I only know my question, so it's not going to work out because I never know your question because I always go second. So,
all right. Well, I'll ask my question then. What fishing story or memory means the most to you?
Fishing story or memory that means that's a hard one. I got so many memories, but which one means the most to me? Probably the one that means the most to me is my dad and I would go to Lawson Creek Park, which is in New Bern. For those people that are from New Bern, or if you go down to the coast on 70, you pass Lawson Creek Park as you cross the Trent River. That's where the boat ramp is. And it's got the big jet, or it used to have the big jet that sat out in front of it. Now I think the jet's been moved maybe to another location, but it's a park. It's not nearly the park. The park back then was nothing. It was just a spot. And we lived right across the street from it. And I'd take my Snoopy rod, my 3-foot Snoopy rod, orange and white. Don't know if y'all had a Snoopy rod, but I did. And I'd go sit on the bank, and my dad would sit there and catch stuff in the grass and bait hooks for me until the cows came home, until I was tired. And it didn't matter if it was 3 inches long or if it was 12 inches long or what the species was. It didn't matter. We're taking that thing home. We're going to eat it. And it just instilled a passion in me for the outdoors that I didn't even know I had at the time. I mean, I loved it, but I didn't know I had it. You know, I found that out later in life, you know, how much I actually did love it. But from that early age of that, you know, has led to my whole life, really. I mean, because a lot of people identify themselves by the job that they have. Fisheries biologists really identify themselves by the job that they have. We're fish biologists. We don't have anything else. We don't know anything else. And so, and when people find out you're a fish biologist, like, what? Like, say again, what do you do? You know, kind of thing. So it's such an odd career that we really are identified by being a fish biologist. And so from that early age, it's literally been, you know, 40 years later, you know, I'm on a podcast talking about fishing and talking about that moment. And yeah, I can remember it to this day. In fact, there's pictures of me wrapped up in a coat, in a toboggan with a Snoopy rod, freezing my butt off, fishing, and my dad going, yeah, I'll go see if I can find something to catch and put on that kind of thing. I mean, really, truly. But
That's awesome.
I will tell this one little thing. As I got older, I got a little wiser. My dad loves to catch striped bass on the coast. That's his jam. He loves that more than anything in this world on the Neuse River. And we woke up one December day and he's like, we got to go. It's cold. We got to go. They bite better in the cold. They bite better in the cold. I'm like, all right, we're going. And we get in the boat. We go down the river. And it is freezing. For an Eastern North Carolina boy, it was cold. Mountain guy, maybe not. But for me, I was freezing. I was in overalls, toboggan, face mask, everything you can name, gloves, the whole shooting match. All you could see was the tip of my nose. That's how cold it was. It was sleeting that day. That's how cold it was. And we had fished for about 4 hours and we ain't caught jack. I mean, not a bite, not a nibble, not a nothing. And my dad looks back at me and he's trying to be a smart aleck. He goes, well, I guess they just ain't biting today. And I looked him right in the face and all he could see was my nose. I said, I don't believe everything I hear. And you told me that it was cold and that the stripers were going to bite, and it ain't. And I don't think we ever went back when it was that cold. I swear I about froze my butt off that day. But those are the things you remember, you know. It's not always about catching the biggest fish, you know. It's the moments that you remember the most.
Robert, did you start out with a Snoopy rod?
No, cane pole.
I started out with a cane pole too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I didn't start out with a cane pole. I mean, you start out on the cane pole on the coast, you ain't fishing a whole lot. I mean, I
was in the hills and hollers of Tennessee, and that's just what they had. So that's what we used. Yeah.
I started out with a cane pole, and I vividly remember when Santa brought me my first Zebco 33, which my dad dubbed the real McCoy. And I vividly remember that.
Yep. And them things are trash. I mean, that's a real. They are trash. I mean, if that thing backlashes, it's 8 hours. Just sitting there, like trying to figure out how to fix it.
Yeah. So, just so you know, Cam, I actually have all of that written down. Oh, it's not going to see it. Nope, it's going to white it out. But I do have story memory written down right above my next question. So I did know it. So I had done that before, I'm sure, and then said, hey, you big dummy, why don't you write those down? So I'll remember next time. But I know you go fishing with Ben a lot, but you probably have some other adventures as well. But what normally is your conversation, and what are you guys talking about most of the time when you're out there?
Probably why they're not biting. That's probably the first thing. You know, it's funny. I'm different every time I go. There's times I'm very focused on fishing and very focused on catching. Ben is unbelievably focused until he's not. And then when he's not focused, he's like was that a squirrel? Shall I go?
Yeah.
Kind of thing. But he's got a little bit of a guide mentality to him. He's all about catching that fish for the people that are on the boat and that kind of stuff. But me, I can be really focused if it's the species I'm like jamming about. Like I really love speckled trout. I grew up on the coast, and that's speckled trout country. It is not red drum country. I know people are like, what? And it's not. It's speckled trout. I mean, that was the animal that everybody chased when I was a child. And so when I'm fishing for speckled trout, I'm very zoned in. But now particularly if I'm not driving the boat and I'm just, whatever, I'm much more relaxed. I kind of take it all in. And the days that I don't catch fish, I probably take it in a whole lot more. With Jonah, that's my son. When we're on the boat, we're talking about life and talking about things of the Lord and talking about, just, where he's going in his life and just having those moments of, trying to figure him out and trying to help guide him and, become the man that he needs to be, as he grows up. And so it just really depends on who's on the boat. If my wife's on the boat, I'm basically fishing and handing her the rod because she don't want to do anything else. And I love her to death. She knows that. She's actually sitting right over here listening to me. And she's laughing a little bit because she knows it's true. I mean, we just went fishing for red drum maybe a couple months ago. And my boy now, I mean, he's 16. I ain't got to do nothing. I mean, he got it down pat. He knows where the fish are. He's got the mindset. He's got the ideas. I mean, he's fished enough that he's, my wife's same age as me, a year younger. And I mean, it's literally like taking a 4-year-old. I mean, it just is. And I love her to death, but it is. You got to cast forward because she don't want to. And then the fish comes in and then she tries to set the hook and that's all wrong. And then I fuss and she's like, why are you fussing at me? I don't ever do this. It just goes on and on. It's a comedy of errors. I'll put it that way.
I hear you.
But that's basically what happens in my boat when you go with me. There's no we can talk about world things. We can talk about. I generally don't talk about politics because it just depresses me. But things that I see that I wish we were better at. One of the things I'll say this, and I'll shut up about this topic, and it's really not related to this, but it kind of is. One of the things that that kind of depresses me, maybe not depresses, might not be, but upsets me about the world is we're so divisive. We can't sit and have a conversation with one another like this, or generally we can't. There's always two sides and they're usually at each other's throats. But it's funny how a natural disaster or a big event or something like that can break all them barriers down, and people that wouldn't even come close to agreeing with one another or arm in arm helping one another, trying to be neighborly, trying to be, just trying to help out, and there is something that God has put in the human spirit that just those things kind of come out when times get tough. I just wish we could hold on to that when times are good, but we know history says that that's not true. And we have a long human history that shows that's not true. I mean, if you look at the Jews throughout the Israelites throughout the Old Testament, when times were good, they were far away from the Lord, and when times were tough, they were begging Him for mercy. And I just wish we were begging Him for mercy, both in the good times and the bad.
Yep.
All right. Well, we're going to jump into our What's Your Favorite segment. So it's self-explanatory. We're going to ask you your favorite in a few different categories, and we're going to get that started right after this.
I'll try to be brief. How about that?
All right. Few things ruin your day on the water as bad as losing gear. But with the retrieval devices for fishing rods, action cams, bow fishing bows, and more from Save Your Outdoors, you don't have to let dropping your stuff ruin your day because you can get it back. The pressure-sensitive filter keeps water from rain and quick dips in the water out, but it lets water in when your gear goes overboard to release a float attached to your gear by 60 feet of line so you can get it back. Go to SaveYourOutdoors.com to learn more and try some for yourself, and use promo code FNFP15 to save 15% on your order. That's SaveYourOutdoors.com and promo code FNFP15.
It's time for What's Your Favorite? Powered by Nakwa Adventure Gear. Power that fits in the palm of your hand.
All right. Welcome to What's Your Favorite? Powered by Nakwa Adventure Gear. Let's get it started off with, what is your favorite scripture?
Who? Probably Psalm 139. That's probably my favorite. One of the reasons why that's my favorite is my grandmother read that psalm to me. We spent a lot of time together after my grandfather died. I was in college, and she was lonely, and I felt burdened for her, and I would go to her house on weekends in particular, and spend time with her, and just spend the weekend with her and do stuff with her and take her wherever she wanted to go and that kind of stuff. And she read that psalm to me. Probably she read it in my childhood, but she definitely read it to me probably every week I was there. I don't know why she was burdened with that. Maybe because I was in college and she thought I needed to hear it, and I did. But that psalm talks about God's omniscience of knowing everything about you, knowing you when you're down and out, knowing when you're up on the high mountain, knowing when you have a bad thought in your mind, knowing when you have a bad thought on your tongue, a bad saying on your tongue, and it just shows the power of God, that he knows every little detail about our lives, from the very beginning of our lives. Actually, before we were ever born, he knew us. And I think of the natural disaster that has struck our nation, and particularly our state, and he knew all that. And he's in control of all that. And that sometimes it's hard for us humans to rectify in our minds. But he has a purpose in all things. And I think that psalm speaks to that, in that he doesn't forsake us either. Just because something like that has occurred, he hasn't forsaken us. And he's there in our time of need as well. So that's why I like that psalm. That's probably why I like that scripture the most.
All right, and we're going to switch and go to your favorite Bible story or parable.
Well, probably because my son's named that, the book of Jonah. I have a lot of favorite Bible stories, but I love the book of Jonah, because the book of Jonah talks about a man who did not want to obey God, absolutely did not want to obey God. He despised the Ninevites. And I've said over, like people that have listened to me, I've said over and over again, he was a racist. He was straight up a racist. He hated the Ninevites because they were Ninevites and for no other reason. And they were enemies of the Israelites at the time. But he really just hated the Ninevites. And he did everything in his power, what he thought was his power, to get away from what God commanded him to do. And he couldn't do it. God forced him back there. And even in the end, even though he went and preached the gospel to the Ninevites, he despised every minute of it. As the book of Jonah closes, he's not happy. He's miserable about it. And I love that story because it tells me that God has a plan for your life. You don't know it, but God has a plan for your life, and you're not going to escape it. You're not. You might think you are, but you're not. You're appointed to be born, and you're appointed to die. And everything in between is appointed too. Whether you want to agree with it or not, it's going to happen, and you're going to do it. And as a Christian, we understand that. People that aren't Christians don't understand that and struggle with that mightily. They lose hope, because they don't have any hope. This world groans for hope. Well, hope's in Jesus and Jesus alone. Hope's not in the things of this earth. Hope's not in the stuff you own. Hope's not in the president, whoever that may be. hope is only in the Lord. And I tell you how much that book resonates in my life. So in my off time, part of the ministry I have at my church is I lead a English as a second language ministry. And we invite anybody from all walks of life that need help with English to come there to learn English, to better, these folks are folks that the vast majority of U.S. citizens despise. I mean, just watch the news. And I'm not being political. But they're here and they're our neighbors. They might not look like you, but they're your neighbor. And the book of Jonah kind of speaks to that. The Ninevites were their neighbor, and Jonah had no desire to preach the gospel to them. These folks are our neighbors, whether we like it, don't like it. And what's God's command for that? God's command is share the gospel with them. And that's what we do at ESL. We teach them English, but we also share the gospel. We show Christ in our lives and share gospel passages with them. And, these folks look like none of the people that come to my church look like folks that come to my ESL class, and we've been doing that for about 10 years now, something like that. And it's been so rewarding to watch people grow both in English, and we've had people that have come to know the Lord, through that ministry. And I'm extremely thankful for that ministry for sure.
Yeah.
That's awesome. All right. So what is your favorite fish to catch?
Well, I'll give you two. Saltwater is speckled trout. Grew up doing it. Love it. When speckled trout are hot and it's a jam, I just like catching fish. I don't care about catching the largest fish in the world. That don't mean nothing to me. Ben wants to go catch an old drum. God bless. I mean, I'll go do it. I like doing it. But I caught one old drum. Let's go catch 40 trout. I'm good. That's my kind of thing. I mean, I grew up bluegill fishing. Freshwater, I love smallmouth. There's not a fish in this world. If you could make a smallmouth 30 pounds, I'm not sure you could get it in the dumb boat. They are unbelievable at fighting, and their jumps and their aerial displays. And we go up north every year. Me and a buddy, we go up north every year and smallmouth fish and just have an absolute ball. It's so much fun. It's fun to catch 50 to 100 smallmouth in a day, and they all weigh 2 to 5 pounds. It's like, this is fun. I can do this every day. Too bad I got to go home and go to work. Kind of thing.
Now, this is along the same line, but it's more about the chess match of making the fish bite. What's your favorite fish to fish for to get that bite?
It's probably speckled trout. Really, I like that thump. I mean, they don't fight very hard, but I love that thump. I mean, they have a thump like none others, like, I'm like, yeah, I like that, kind of thing. Red drum's just dumb. They'll hit anything that's moving. I mean, that's got to be the dumbest fish on the planet. I mean, they're easy. I mean, they're not easy to catch. I'll say that. Ben's going to be mad at me. But they're just dumb. I mean, they're not a smart fish. I mean, there are some smart fish and there's not some smart fish. And yeah, red drum ain't too bright.
I agree.
You tell him I said so. He'll listen. He'll be like, Ford knows nothing. And he's right. I don't.
All right. So what's your favorite fish to eat?
Ooh, all of them? Is that a category? Is all of the above? Growing up on the coast, I ate everything. I ate everything from a striped mullet. I've tried river herring. You can have it. I don't like them. That's like eating a greasy cracker. They're just oily, beyond oily. Favorite fish to eat. I like mahi a lot. Cobia is really good. Yeah, I like them all, as you can tell. And if you could see my entire appearance, you would understand that I do like to eat a lot of fish. It's just one of them things. I mean, I grew up doing it. I mean, we ate a lot of what we call. I mean, we ate all. We didn't eat them every time, but we take bluegills home and eat them. I love bluegill. I really love red ears. That's like the unsung hero of fish eating is a shell cracker. I mean,
Ooh.
they are unbelievably good to me. They have a sweeter meat than like bluegill or any of the other sunfish. And I don't know if it's because they're eating mussels or snails. I don't know. But they do taste a little different. And when you catch a 2-pounder,
Yes,
it's like, yeah, let's put that in the boat. We're taking that 2-pounder home.
My mom used to do shake and bake with shell crackers, and
Oh, yeah.
that was good.
I've picked many a sunfish clean, a whole
Mm.
sunfish. I've picked many a one. There ain't a stitch left on it. All that's left is the shell. That's it.
So we're going to stay in the food category. Favorite fishing snack?
Well, it's not a moon pie, especially not a banana moon pie. Favorite fishing snack. It's hard to beat a nab. Just be honest with you. It's hard to beat a nab. They kind of, if your stomach not feeling right, they'll settle it down. If you're hungry, they'll settle that down. In the Oakley house, not in this Oakley house, but in the greater Oakley house, when we went fishing, it was, barbecue sandwiches, fried chicken, and all the fixings, because my granddad ran a barbecue restaurant. So he ate and called it fishing. I mean, honestly, my dad and I were fishing. My granddad just sitting there eating and when the food was out, he's like, ain't it time to go? I mean, we could be whacking them. And he'd be like, ain't it time to go? And we're like, no, it ain't time to go. He's like, we're out of food. And so he was a very large man in his heyday. And we had, I lie to you not, whole fried chickens, barbecue sandwiches to burn, and hush puppies and sweet tea and everything in between. We had the whole gamut when we went fishing with him. So
Damn, I was on the wrong boat.
We could hook you up if you need
For
to.
real. I'm on the wrong boat altogether. I'm
will
eating
tell
Little
you-
Debbie's and they're eating whole fried chickens. There's something's wrong with this picture.
And I will tell you, there is really nothing better than cold fried chicken on a boat. I'm telling you, it is the jam. It really is. Pro tip here, guys: cold fried chicken on a boat.
I agree. That's a good one. Oh, it's me.
One of you.
What is I don't need secret spots or GPS coordinates or anything, but what's your favorite body of water to fish?
It'll have to be my home, Noose River. From a spot from about the Maple Cypress Landing to the mouth of the river. Within that's probably about 40-mile stretch of stream. You can catch everything. There ain't a fish you can't catch that's in North Carolina, other than the kind of the western mountain region fishes. You can't catch a smallmouth, you can't catch a muskie. But from catfishes to sunfishes to largemouth bass to red drum, flounder, speckled trout, some days tarpon, groupers, black drum, sheep's head, it's all there. I mean, I've spent many a day fishing for flounder and end up catching probably more largemouth than I caught flounder. It's just a special place. It's a special place to me, but it's not special. There are other places in our state and other places in the country that are kind of like that. But the Noose River has a pretty wide, and the Tar River, both of them have a pretty wide expanse of that kind of habitat where you could go anywhere and catch all kinds of species within 5 casts and not know what they're going to be till they get to the boat. I mean, one of the most favorite things I ever did was at the train trestle at Newbern on the Noose River in the wintertime catching yellow perch. I mean, whopper yellow perch, 2-pound yellow perch. And we were breaking ice to do it, and we loved every minute of it. I mean, loved every minute of it. And you probably catch a speckled trout while you're catching yellow perch. That's just the way it was,
That's awesome.
All right, you can only pick one fishing lure to fish the rest of your life. What lure are you going to fish?
Oh, that's our question. I mean, it might have been your question first, but we picked up on that question for sure. Well, since how speckled trout's my favorite bait, it's probably going to be a twitch bait, which in my heyday was a mirror lure. generally was the 808 color variety of some kind. 17 with an 808 color pattern. These days, I really like the Paul Browns, the soft dines and the XLs. They're a little bit heavier, got a little bit different wobble to them when they sink. And that wobble makes a difference because a lot of times trout hit when it stops. And that wobble really makes a difference, in my opinion. I can throw it a lot farther, too, in the wind, and it's always windy when you're trout fishing.
Yeah.
So I picked two, but they're basically the same bait, just a little bit different design.
For sure. And last but not least, what is your favorite time of year to fish?
Probably fall. I love fall. Fall's my favorite time of year. I love because we're coming out of hot, going into, you get that cool, crisp morning, and then it warms up to, 70, 75, and it's just a beautiful day outside. And I really like that. I like fishing in that kind of weather. And it's usually peak trout season then. In fact, here in a couple of weeks, I'm taking 2 weeks off from work and going trout fishing. I've been doing that for probably the last 7 or 8 years because it's the only time. If I don't take time off, I don't get to go fishing with my job now. And so I go 1 week with a buddy of mine that's become just a really, really good friend of mine for a long time now. He was one of the volunteers on the Lake Norman project. And then the next week is a bunch of fish heads. It's a bunch of my friends from work. We all get in a house together and eat like pigs and fish like dogs for a solid week, and we have a blast. And it's a good time for sure.
Yeah, that's good stuff.
Absolutely. All right, man. Well, we are going to start wrapping things up.
Cool.
What do you have coming up next for you and for the Wildlife Commission and the podcast, whatever it is,
Sure.
Wherever you want to take that question, what do you have coming up
Sure.
next?
So we're, on the podcast front, we're still doing one a month. We're probably going to a video series. The next couple of ones, I think we just dropped the carp one maybe this week. I can't remember exactly. I've been in the woods, man. Been without cell coverage, so I don't even know. The next one, we'll talk about ANS species, which are aquatic nuisance species. So that'll be a pretty good podcast. I think the December podcast will feature Matt Airy and Brian Thrift, both on the bass tours, on 2 different bass tours, one on BASS and the other one one's an elite and one's a MLF pro. So that'll be good. In fact, I think we're recording that tomorrow. And then going into the new year, we'll be highlighting fisheries all over the state, just like we always have been. As far as the Inland Fisheries Division and the work that we're doing, we got some things to work on when it comes to the mountain region, for sure. That will take a lot of our focus over the next few years. But we're still working hard to try to restore striped bass on the coast. We're going to be working hard to fix our hatcheries in the mountains for trout and to get trout back up and running like it should be. So those are some really big projects that we're trying to tackle, some problems that we're trying to tackle. Things in the Piedmont are pretty good, for the most part, other than the spread of Alabama bass, and we're trying our best with that. We're stocking F1s in a few reservoirs, seeing how they work out, see if they're not going to solve the Alabama bass problem, but they may help our largemouth problems. And we're looking into trying to figure out smallmouth and if we can stock them effectively in our mountain communities. One, because of Alabama bass introductions, and now we are in a place where some of our streams may need that kind of help because of just what's happened. So we'll see how that goes. Smallmouth are not the easiest to raise in North Carolina for whatever reason. But those are the things on the horizon.
All right.
Awesome.
Absolutely. And if whatever websites or social media, anything like that you want to plug for either you or for the commission or podcast, whatever, go for it.
I don't have websites. Absolutely. ncwildlife.org. Go to our fishing page. Has a ton of information on black bass, which are the bass that everybody like to catch, largemouth, smallmouth, Alabamas. We have a whole page that's dedicated to trout fishing. which is a great resource if you're going trout fishing in the mountains. And, we have a lot of other things there. You have things like access areas where you can go, where you can take your boat, or if you don't have a boat, where you can go fish from the shore or fish from a pier. We have hundreds of opportunities scattered across the state, upwards of probably 350 or so, whether they're boating access areas that we own or public fishing access areas that we own. And we're adding more each year. And so the opportunities for people in our state to get out, go fishing, even if they don't want to go fishing, just to get outside and enjoy the outdoors and enjoy what God's given us, is there. And I hope more people take advantage of the opportunity.
Absolutely. And anyone you want to sponsor, supporters, anyone you want to give a shout out to, say thank you to, the floor is yours.
We don't have any sponsors other than the citizens of the state of North Carolina. And we are thankful for each and every one of them. We're thankful for our anglers that support the work that we do. We do it for you. We would not be possible if it was not for you buying fishing gear and fishing license and that kind of stuff. That's how we are supported. And so, we're thankful for all of those folks that, get outside, enjoy the natural resources that we have. And, hopefully if you listen to our podcasts and listen to podcasts like this, you'll learn more and more about, the opportunities that are available to you as a citizen of our state. And so, we don't have any sponsors. That's the government for you. The sponsors are the people.
Awesome. Well, Corey, thank you so much for coming on the show, man.
Thanks for having me.
Always have a blast anytime I get to kind of nerd out on anything fish.
Yeah. And the last thing I would say, one, thank you both for having me on the podcast. I've really enjoyed my time here. You're both great hosts. What I would tell your listeners is, look, if you got a concern, you got a thought, you got a question, whatever, and it's related to fish, you can contact us at any time, day or night. Maybe don't call me at 4 a.m, but you can call me. I might not be so happy when I answer the phone, but you can call me. But you can contact us at twobaldbiologists@ncwildlife.org, and we will be glad to answer your questions. We will take all the time it takes, and if I don't know the answer, I'm pretty sure I got somebody that does, and we will get them to you.
Heck yeah, there you go.
Absolutely. All right, man. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it, Corey.
Mm-hmm.
Omnia Fishing is an online fishing retail store that has everything you need for your next outing. Whether you need tackle, rods, reels, fishing reports and tips, or even weather reports and topographical maps. With their ambassador program, you have the opportunity to buy baits and gear proven to work in your fishing spots, or submit your own fishing reports and get Omnia credit when someone buys something from your report. Upgrade your membership to Premium for free shipping and a percentage of your purchases back, or upgrade to Premium Pro to get Navionics, weather, and more on their already awesome app. Go to omniafishing.com and use promo code FNF10 for 10% off your purchase. Or if it's your first time making a purchase from Omnia, use promo code FNF15 for 15% off instead. If finesse fishing is your comfort zone, something you want to learn better this year, or just something you like to tie on as a Hail Mary pass, Jade's Jigs has everything you need and more, and it's all eco-friendly and lead-free. With an awesome selection of baits and colors, they've got a variety of techniques covered for you. Finesse jigs, underspins, Nico weights, Ned rigs, and more are all waiting for you at jadesjigs.com. And while you're there, use promo code FNF10 for 10% off your purchase. That's jadesjigs.com and promo code FNF10 for 10% off. All right, another awesome episode, and this one is it's another one of those long episodes that we throw out there every now and then. But since it's running so long, Robert, let's go ahead and unless you have something eating at you that you need to throw out there, let's go ahead and close it out with prayer, man.
I'll say one thing, and then I'll let you close us out. There's one thing that Corey said a couple of times that I wrote down and wanted to touch base on, and I think something that we all should do is not just text or email, but talk to each other with a civil tongue. And if we all did a lot more of that, instead of shooting a message or an email, you can never read somebody's inflection or how they're saying it. But, you know, that conversation when you're out and about, you know, the more we rely on that social media aspect and the text messages, and we're losing that as a society. So talk to each other with a civil tongue, and then I'll let you close this out.
Absolutely. All right. God, thank you so much for this podcast, and thank you for a chance to come together and talk about you and talk about fish and fishing and all of the fun things that go with that. Thank you for Corey and what he's doing for our state and what he means to so many people, and what he's doing and allowing you to do through him. Thank you for the listener, no matter where they are right now. I pray that you meet them where they are, give them what they need through this podcast, and pray that something in this podcast is being used by you to put on a show in their life. God, we love you, and it is in Jesus' name that we pray. And also want to throw out there, be with the victims of Hurricane Helene and those that are right now going through Hurricane Milton. I pray that you give them comfort and necessities, and I pray that you continue to lay on the hearts of others to go and help and serve. God, we love you. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
All right. That's going to do it for this episode. Y'all take care, and God bless.
See you next week.
Thank you for listening to the Faith and Fishing podcast. Please consider supporting those that support us. Jade's Jigs lead-free finesse tackle. Use promo code FNF10 at jadesjigs.com for 10% off. Save your outdoors. Stop losing your gear. Use promo code FNFP15. SaveYourOutdoors.com for 15% off. Omnia Fishing. Check out Premium, Premium Pro, and their Ambassador program. Use promo code FNF10 for 10% off at OmniaFishing.com. And if it's your first order, use promo code FNF15 for 15% instead. Mr. B Lure Company. High-quality handmade baits made right here in the U.S. MrBLureCompany.com. Use promo code faithnfishn for 15% off your first purchase. Get outdoors, pedal, and paddle. Check them out at the shop in Greensboro, North Carolina, or at shopgetoutdoors.com for all your paddling and cycling needs. And Naqua Adventure Gear, lighting, power, and all the connectors at Naqua.com. Please rate, review, subscribe on whatever app you're listening on. That's going to do it for this episode. Y'all take care, and God bless.